It was one of those mornings where everything seemed to be going wrong, and I was already running late for the board meeting. The last thing I needed was another delay. I stepped into the grand lobby of the hotel I'd helped build, the place where I'd been a part of every design decision, every hiring choice, every small detail. The soft lighting and plush decor that had once impressed me now felt too familiar. But what happened next would change everything. I approached the check-in desk, smiling politely as I walked up. I had a meeting with a potential investor in a few hours, and a quick rest before that would have been perfect. The desk clerk, a young woman no older than 22, didn't greet me as expected. Instead, her eyes barely left the computer screen in front of her. "Can I help you?" she asked, sounding annoyed. "Yes, I have a reservation," I replied, slipping my credit card onto the counter. "The name is Alexis Thompson." She stared at the card for a moment before typing something into her system. "I'm sorry, I can't find your reservation." "Can you give me another name?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief. She seemed almost irritated. I raised an eyebrow, wondering what was going on. "I am the CEO of this hotel chain," I said calmly, "and I believe my reservation should be in the system under my name." Her eyes flickered briefly, and I could tell she didn't believe me. "Ma'am, you're going to have to speak to someone else. This is not my responsibility." Before I could respond, she turned her back on me, walking away to find another staff member. I stood there, frozen, for a moment, watching her walk away. The nerve of her. The hotel had been my vision. I had poured countless hours into making sure it was everything the company needed. Yet here I was, being dismissed as though I didn't belong. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. But the frustration was boiling up inside me. I wasn't going to let this go. Not after everything I had built. I looked around, hoping to see a manager, someone who would recognize me and smooth things over. And that's when I saw him, a tall man, probably in his late 40s, dressed in a dark suit. He walked confidently toward the front desk, giving me a cursory glance as he approached. "Is there a problem here?" he asked the clerk in a tone that suggested he was more interested in avoiding a scene than actually solving the issue. "Yes, this woman says she has a reservation," the clerk replied, her tone still dismissive. "But I can't find her name in the system. She claims she's the CEO of the hotel." The man looked me up and down. I saw the instant judgment in his eyes, and I could feel my blood begin to boil. "Well, ma'am, if you're the CEO, I'm sure you understand that our policy requires identification, and the system doesn't seem to recognize your name. Perhaps you should go to the VIP desk," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. The nerve of him. It was as if he hadn't even heard me or seen my credentials. I took a deep breath. This wasn't going to end like this. Not today. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had worked tirelessly for years to ensure the hotel's success, and yet here I was, being treated like a nobody. "Look," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm, "I'm not here to argue. I simply want to get to my room. You're not understanding that I own this place. I designed this hotel. I built this brand." The man's expression faltered for a split second, but he quickly recovered. He motioned for the clerk to step aside, his eyes narrowing as he sized me up. "If you are truly who you say you are," he began, his voice no longer as dismissive but still skeptical, "then I'm sure you have proof. Can you provide your ID?" My patience was running thin. I reached into my bag, pulling out a business card with my name, title, and the hotel logo emblazoned on it. But just before I handed it over, I realized that it wasn't enough. They would need to hear it from someone else, someone more authoritative. I walked past the desk, heading straight for the back office, where I knew the general manager would be. The hallway was quiet, the air heavy with tension. The only sound was the clicking of my heels against the polished marble floors. I knocked sharply on the door. "It's Alexis Thompson," I called out, my voice firm. "I need to speak with you." The door swung open almost immediately, and I was met with the startled face of Tom, the general manager, who had worked under me for nearly 5 years. His eyes widened as he took in my appearance, clearly surprised to see me in the lobby. "Alexis. What are you doing here?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I didn't hesitate. "I've just been treated like I'm invisible at my own hotel. Apparently, they don't recognize me anymore." Tom's face shifted from surprise to concern as I stepped into his office, closing the door behind me with a soft click. He motioned for me to sit, but I didn't feel like sitting. Not yet. My nerves were on edge, and the last thing I wanted was to sit down and act like everything was fine. "Alexis, I'm sorry, but what happened? What do you mean they don't recognize you?" Tom asked, his tone genuine but confused. I threw my hands up in frustration, pacing back and forth. "I don't know how this happened, Tom." The clerk at the desk, the man who spoke to me, none of them seemed to believe I was the CEO. They wouldn't even check the system properly, and now they're treating me like an outsider in my own business. Tom shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Look, I'm sure there's just been some kind of mistake, but this is embarrassing. We have to keep the business looking professional. If someone checks in and doesn't appear to have a reservation, they have to follow procedure. Don't you get it?" I shot back. "The procedure is for guests, not for the person who runs this place. You know what I've done for this brand, Tom. I built this hotel from the ground up. And now, no one here recognizes me. It's beyond frustrating." I could see him starting to understand. He knew how much I had sacrificed to make this hotel what it was. How much effort I'd put into every detail. But even now, the thought of being overlooked by my own staff, by people who should have known better, was something I couldn't just brush aside. "I'll go talk to them," Tom said, standing up and walking toward the door. "No," I stopped him. "Let me handle it. I've had enough. It's time they understood who I am, and who they've been disrespecting." I walked past him and made my way back to the lobby. As I approached the front desk again, the same clerk was still there, now looking at her phone. The man who had dismissed me earlier was standing nearby, talking to someone on the phone. I didn't waste any time. I walked right up to the desk, the entire lobby seeming to quiet as I did. The eyes of a few nearby guests shifted to me, their curiosity piqued. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady but laced with authority, "I think it's time we had a conversation." The clerk looked up at me, a mix of surprise and defensiveness on her face. The man who had dismissed me earlier quickly ended his phone call and turned to face me, his expression still skeptical but now tinged with a hint of unease. "I believe we have some unfinished business," I said, standing tall. My voice was calm but carried the weight of years of hard work and determination. "I'd like to remind you that I'm not just any guest here. I am Alexis Thompson, the CEO of this hotel chain. I'm the one who built this business, and I'm the reason this place even exists. Yet somehow, you've chosen to treat me like an ordinary guest, completely dismissing my position." The man opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off before he could say anything. "I've worked day and night to make sure this hotel thrives, to ensure we're recognized as one of the finest establishments in the city. And yet, here I am, standing before you while you dismiss me with your disrespectful behavior. You can't even bother to verify who I am or check your system properly." I took a step closer to the desk, my gaze unflinching. "If you had taken the time to verify my identity earlier, you would have found that I'm not just some random person walking in. I am the face of this hotel." The clerk looked embarrassed, her face flushed with the realization that she had made a terrible mistake. The man next to her, however, still seemed to be processing what I was saying. I didn't know," he stammered, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'm sorry, Miss Thompson. We should have verified everything properly. This was a huge mistake on our part." I nodded, not ready to accept just an apology. A mistake doesn't cut it. Not when it comes to something this important. When people come to this hotel, they need to feel respected. And that starts with how you treat the people who are behind its success. I turned to the clerk, who was still looking at me wide-eyed. I don't care if you didn't know who I was. But what you need to understand is this: respect isn't something that should be earned based on titles. It's something that should be given freely, regardless of who someone is or what they represent. There was a long pause as the tension in the air thickened. The man at the desk, clearly embarrassed, lowered his head. I truly apologize. It won't happen again. Please, allow us to make it right. I didn't need to hear more. Make it right by ensuring this never happens to anyone again, I said firmly, my gaze unwavering. I'll be in my room. I turned on my heel and made my way toward the elevator, the sound of my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor echoing behind me. As I entered the elevator, I pressed the button for the penthouse suite, where I always stayed when I was in town. The doors closed with a soft chime, and for a moment, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had handled it. But the sting of being disrespected in my own hotel still lingered, like a bitter aftertaste I couldn't shake off. I couldn't let that kind of treatment slide, not in a place that I had built from the ground up. But even more than that, I was angry. Angry that I had been reduced to just another person in a hotel lobby, treated like an outsider, when I was the one who had made everything possible. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped into the penthouse. The suite was luxurious, just as I had designed it, and for a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to take in the beauty of the space. The soft lighting, the elegant furniture, the breathtaking view of the city skyline, it all felt so hollow now. I set my bag down on the couch and walked over to the window, looking out at the bustling city below. I thought about all the work, the sacrifices, the late nights spent managing this hotel chain. And in that moment, I felt a twinge of something unfamiliar, doubt. Had I lost touch with my own business? Had the people working for me become so detached from the essence of what I had created that they no longer recognized the face of the company? I shook my head, trying to push the thought aside. No. This was just an isolated incident. I had worked too hard to let one setback define me. But the question remained, what if I wasn't just the CEO anymore? What if, somewhere along the way, I had become just another face in the crowd? I picked up my phone and began drafting an email to the board of directors, outlining the changes I intended to make to prevent something like this from ever happening again. I wasn't going to let my staff forget who they worked for. I wasn't going to let them forget who I was. This wasn't just about being treated with respect. It was about making sure the respect I had earned, the respect I had built, was ingrained in every single person working under me. The next morning, I walked back into the lobby of the hotel, my steps purposeful and confident. The events of the day before were still fresh in my mind, but I knew I couldn't let them define me. It was time for the staff to see the full weight of what had happened. It was time for them to understand who they were working for, and why respect needed to be mutual. Tom was already waiting for me by the front desk, and his face looked a little tense, likely expecting another confrontation. But today, I wasn't here for drama. I was here for change. Alexis, he said, a little uncertain, I just want to say, I understand what happened yesterday, and I've taken steps to make sure this doesn't happen again. I nodded but didn't say anything at first. I wasn't here for apologies. I was here to make sure things changed. I appreciate that, Tom. But this goes beyond just one apology, I said, my voice firm but composed. This is about creating a culture of respect. And it starts with every single person who works here, from the front desk to the management. I built this hotel. I need everyone to understand that. Tom's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. I understand, Alexis. We'll have a meeting with all staff to address this, make sure everyone's on the same page. You won't have to worry about this happening again. I gave him a sharp nod, signaling that I was pleased with his response. Good. I'm trusting you to follow through, Tom. This hotel isn't just about the guests. It's about the people who work here, and they need to know that every decision, every detail, comes from the top. Before I left, I turned back to the lobby staff, who were quietly observing from the side. "I expect better from all of you," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "When someone walks into this hotel, they should feel welcome and respected. And that starts with you. If you can't treat people with respect, you won't be working here long." The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling into the air. I turned on my heel and walked out without another word, feeling the power of my own presence in every step I took. As I stepped outside, I took a deep breath, knowing that this was only the beginning of my real work. It wasn't enough to run a business, I had to make sure the people who represented that business understood its core values. I would not be ignored again. And from that day forward, no one in that hotel would ever forget who I was. Weeks passed, and slowly, the ripple effect of the events in the lobby began to show. The staff, once complacent and dismissive, began to treat their work, and each other, with a newfound respect. The hotel's culture shifted. Meetings were held, policies were revised, and even the simplest tasks were given more care. I didn't just want a team that worked for me, I wanted a team that believed in the same principles that had built this place: dedication, respect, and a commitment to excellence. I stayed closely involved, overseeing every detail, not just the big decisions, but the little things: how guests were greeted, how staff communicated, and even how we handled complaints. I made sure everyone knew that their role, no matter how small it seemed, played a part in the success of the hotel. And if they couldn't see that, they wouldn't be working here for long. A month later, the hotel received its highest rating yet. Reviews were glowing, not just about the luxurious amenities or the stunning views, but about the warmth and professionalism of the staff. My reputation had been restored, not by the apologies of a few individuals, but by the overhaul of a whole system. It wasn't about making a point to one man or one clerk, it was about setting a standard that would last. The respect I demanded wasn't just for me, it was for the entire team and for every guest that walked through those doors. The hotel became more than just a place to stay, it became a symbol of what hard work, respect, and leadership could build. And as I walked through the lobby one last time that month, I finally felt the pride that had been absent for so long. The hotel was mine again, in every sense of the word. I'd been tested, and I passed. But more importantly, I had rebuilt something much stronger than before: my place in my own hotel.